Hello and welcome to Unbox, the podcast that helps you to raise your awareness and see a different perspective on life. Today we're going to continue discussing with Dr. Penny Kelly her experience in consciousness.
Penny Kelly, teacher and author, From the Soil to the Stomach. Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
In the 3 previous podcasts, we discussed your first 3 books, which are really about spiritual awakening. And I'd like to know, how did you come to write a book about health and healing after the first 3 books on spiritual awakening?
Well, 2 of those books, one was Elves, and the other, The Elves of Lily Hill Farm. The other was Robes, and my encounters with the little men in brown robes is what I call them,
yes.
The robes being my shorthand for that. Both came to this point in our communications. The elves saying that, we needed to manage our vineyards differently and different things that we could do with the soil. And so I learned about soil health. And the robes had said that the world would collapse because of poor health. And those kind of were hanging in the background of my mind. And then when I was about 46 years of age, I'm working hard, etc., and I developed rheumatoid arthritis. It was a devastating experience. So I had this personal interest in figuring out how to heal that.
Yes.
And I had members of my family that were shaped very much like pretzels because of rheumatoid arthritis, and I just thought, I'm not going that direction. There must be a way to heal this. And I began learning, and the more I learned, the more I discovered that what I thought would work wouldn't work, and I kept at it and kept working at it, and eventually found my way toward natural health, naturopathic medicine, and eventually became a naturopathic physician. But From the Soil to the Stomach was all of the things that I learned on that journey to figuring out, how did I come to have this disease, and how do I reverse this, eliminate this, and rebuild my body.
That's interesting.
That was how I came to write it.
What is the connection between the soil and the stomach?
I think probably the most important thing I could say at this point is that the soil has to be living soil. That means it has to be full of microorganisms. Every teaspoon of soil has millions and millions of living microorganisms, most of them microscopic, some of them not. When we say the soil is alive, that's what we mean. When we say the soil is dead, the microorganisms have been sprayed to death with various poisons. They die. The waste matter that these organisms put out is no longer there, and that waste material that those organisms create is very sticky, and the stickiness causes the soil to clump together in these little awkwardly shaped crumbs, I guess is the term.
Yes.
And the crumbs then form this soil structure with lots of air and lots of channels for water. And when the microorganisms die, there's no more waste. The soil is not sticky. It doesn't form crumbs. The whole thing collapses. And the result is that the food that grows in that soil will be worthless to eat because it has no real nutrition in it. So as the soil degenerates, each generation of humans degenerates a little further. And what we're seeing is that we're beginning to experience very serious disease earlier and earlier and earlier.
That's right, and possibly even with the new generation, lots of infertility and allergies and all sorts of diseases really on every level. What does From the Soil to the Stomach teach, basically?
It teaches how to use a 4-point program of food, supplements, exercise, and detox procedures to heal catastrophic illness and disease and rebuild the body. And it gives a whole bunch, like part 1 and part 2, I believe, are just a lot of really interesting information. And then there's a whole section that has to do with how do you do detox and what's involved in that. It's the same with the body as it is with your house. If you never clean the body out, then there's going to be a lot of stuff in the corners, and all of that waste matter piles up, and pretty soon, if it were your house, if you never took out the newspapers or the trash, after 20 years, it'd be impossible to move around.
That's right. And why is this an important book, Penny?
I think it's important because it teaches, number 1, that the body can be rebuilt.
That's an interesting point, yes. So it's always regenerating, really.
Yes, every day the cells are creating new cells, and, you know, if they have what they need to rebuild themselves, and that those things that you have to have are, number 1, amino acids. If you don't have amino acids, you can't use minerals. So minerals are the second thing. If you don't have minerals, you can't utilize vitamins. So vitamins and minerals are critical, but, you know, there's a priority of operation there. And then if you don't have the vitamins and minerals, you can't produce enzymes within the body, and your body is basically, you know, tens of thousands of enzyme systems all working together. And if you don't produce enzymes, then you're not going to be able to produce hormones and other chemicals that run the body. So you just kind of fall apart. So that's the first thing. It teaches that the body can be rebuilt. It teaches that we're one with nature, and I think even more importantly than, or more important for our time, is that it teaches that there's this thing called sustainable medicine.
Yes.
And that you can heal yourself in a sustainable way without doing more damage than what you had in the first place. You don't want a medicine or a procedure
that creates more chaos or more disharmony.
Right. That just doesn't work over the long term, and so we say it's not sustainable. I think it teaches that it's important to take responsibility for yourself, and it also teaches, and this has been one of the things that some of my students have said to me over and over, the amazing thing is that this healing can be done at home without huge cost or devastating side effects. And I think that has been really encouraging to a huge number of people.
That's interesting. It sounds to me, what I understand, Penny, from what you're saying, that if we are lacking one group, we would not, or our bodies would not be able to ingest another group. Even though we might take vitamins, they could be totally useless to the body.
That's right. And that's not known at all. So it's really too bad. And there's so many things. You know, my grandmother lived on a farm, lived to be 100 years old.
Wow.
Fed herself, and her father lived to be 101. They practiced this old German way of life, and I was very anxious to get to the city and get modern, and, you know, get involved in all the exciting things happening, and completely ignored the basics of life. And what Grandma always said was that healing was a way of life.
That's right.
It wasn't something that you did, you know, when you got sick. It was something that you did constantly to avoid getting sick, and she never was sick.
Yes.
I don't know that she ever even had a cold.
That's interesting.
And then the book contains a synopsis of the work of Weston Price, who is just was a fabulous man, fabulous researcher back in the early part of the 1920s. And, you know, I put his work together with my grandmother's and said, okay, we need to do things differently.
Yes. It sounds to me also that what your grandmother says we could express today, perhaps we were talking about frequencies before. And I think what you're saying, the way to having healing and sustaining it is to sustain that frequency for so long.
That's true. That's true. What happens is that when you take in certain foods, the elements in that food are bringing in particular frequencies. this is one thing that I learned from the Little Men in Brown Robes, actually, that you take in a frequency,
Yes.
and the frequency then resounds in the body and stimulates particular gene reaction, genetics. Our genes respond in a given way. If the frequency is not present in the body, the genetics do not respond, and thus we have this whole group of scientists saying that, it's a genetic problem. Well, that's only half the story.
Right.
What causes the genetics to work is this resonance between the elements in various foods and the frequency, the tuning frequency of a particular set of genetics.
So if we don't take certain foods, basically we're not creating that resonance.
That's right. And in the period of time before the Industrial Revolution, people generally lived to be into their hundreds.
Yeah.
They didn't die from an infection or an accident. They lived long lives, and it was noted here in America that people who came from the old country, which was Europe, and who continued their practices often ended up burying their daughters and their sons who had taken on the more modern diet, what's called the Western white man's diet.
Right.
And those who stuck to the old ways lived a good long life.
That's really interesting, yes.
Yeah, and they were healthy right to the end.
Penny, can we talk, or is your upcoming book something you can talk about?
Yes, actually it's in print now.
It's in print now, and it's out in spring of 2007.
No, the Consciousness and Energy Volume 1 is just out for probably about 4 weeks now.
Oh,
Volume 2 will be out in the spring of 2007.
Oh, lovely. Would you come back and talk to us about your new book?
Oh, sure, I would love to.
Penny Kelly, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you, Sahar.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.